This Monero Matteo video is sponsored by Cake Wallet. Safely store, send, receive, and trade your Monero on Cake Wallet on Android and iOS. All right, what's going on, everybody? This is Monero Matteo. Welcome to the channel. We are blessed to have somebody here from the the Haven community. He is somebody who is a community outreach guy. He knows a little bit about the project, so we're happy to have him onto the program to teach us a little bit about this promising project. So, Hawk, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Excellent, excellent. So, I wanted to start off by just digging into the history of Haven. From what I read, there were a few developers that started the project, and then I guess they dropped the project, and other developers said, hey, this seems like a pretty cool idea. Let's pick this back up. Is that how it happened? What is sort of the timeline of the Haven project?
Sure. So I think there's enough history with Haven Protocol to do a soap opera, which, like any good crypto project, we've had our fair share of drama and changes over the years, but that's the gist of it. So the project was launched, announced in 2018, and that was when the first two anonymous developers sort of came up with this light bulb moment idea of a truly private algorithmic stablecoin based on Monero. That was the idea that got everybody interested in Haven, and really sort of grew the community from the beginning. And then it turned out that the idea was pretty hard, pretty complicated, pretty difficult on the dev side to accomplish. And so they toiled around for about a year in fits and starts, and made some good progress, but also didn't really have a full vision for how this could work in the real world versus just on a white paper. And they ended up leaving the project in around January of 2019, and the community and the project kind of came to a crossroads where they said, look, this is the two guys that started this are leaving. They've abandoned the project. They've handed over the code that they've worked on so far, and they've said good luck. Does anybody want to keep this going? And I think really the whole community came together and said, no, look, the idea is too important, too interesting, to just abandon. And recognizing that it's hard, we should figure out a way to do it. And that's when the lead of the project stepped up. He was a member of the community at the time. Dweeb is his Discord handle. He has a public profile too. And a couple other developers who are part of the community stepped up and said, well, let's take this over as a community, figure out how to solve the problems that the first two developers couldn't solve, and make this something that could be sustainable long term. Because the idea, the concept is too important to walk away from. So that is kind of the history.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the concept is basically to have offshore banking, pretty much, right?
Yeah,
And yeah, we're going into an article yesterday where it was talking about, because of the new regulations that they're looking to put on banks, where the IRS is, I guess, going to be tracking people who have over $600 in their bank account. And given inflation and everything else that's going on, that's not that much. And who knows how they're going to do this logistically, but it said in one of the articles, this is going to significantly increase demand for offshore banking. And I thought, offshore banking, there's a project like that in the crypto community. What is that? And so, yeah, there's a very important demand for this, I think, that's going to be coming in the future. And so it's good that you guys are working on this. But so that's a cool, interesting history that's sort of in alignment with this cypherpunk culture. There's a cool problem to solve. Let's just try to solve it, just because we like to solve complicated things. But you guys are now going into Haven 2.0, correct?
Yep.
What's behind that?
Sure. So it would probably help to give you a little bit of history of how we got from sort of January 2019, when the community took over the project, to where we are now. So if I could take a couple minutes and walk through that, I think it might make a lot more sense to people who are new to the project.
Absolutely.
So after the community took things over, it was several months of development work that was really slow. It was a really hard problem to solve, and the key for Haven is, the goal is to build an ecosystem of private stable assets that are based on Monero, built on top of Monero, that are, controlled only by the user in their vault, right? An offshore bank was the first tagline for the project, your own offshore bank, and it still makes sense. I think the idea is that, as Monero has sort of set the gold standard for what privacy looks like in crypto, the thing that many people still want are some option to also have stable value in their assets, whether it's value based on USD or fiat, whether it's value based on Bitcoin or something else. They wanted to have privacy while also being able to opt out of volatility. And that's sort of the idea behind a private algorithmic stablecoin inside an ecosystem that's controlled by you, that takes advantage of all of Monero's incredible privacy innovations. So as they started building that, they realized that the first problem was that they didn't have a solution that would allow multiple assets to exist on the Monero chain. And this is sort of loosely described as the colored coins implementation, where you can have multiple assets, representing real world assets in a stable way on one chain. And actually, this was something that was proposed originally to be built on top of Bitcoin, but when Ethereum and ERC20, took off, it sort of became irrelevant, for the Bitcoin community. And that's basically what our developers spent a year building. They created a new proof on top of Monero that could prove values between different types of assets on one chain. And the first asset that they launched was our private stablecoin xUSD, which is a USD stablecoin on the Haven network. That was launched in July of 2020. So it was really like a year and a half or so before xUSD was launched. I think the first testnet that we did with xUSD was probably a year after the community took over the project. And it was a ton of work. It was a small team, no real financial backing from anybody other than the resources that we have as a project. But it was a really exciting thing. So it was last summer we launched xUSD, allows you to burn XHV for the dollar value equivalent of xUSD, all in your own vaults, private vaults, no third parties, no exchanges, no middlemen. And that was probably the biggest milestone for the project, was last summer. And between last summer and this summer, the use of xUSD grew pretty significantly. It was really incredible to see. And I think as of when we looked at it last back in June, there had been around 160 million in transactions using xUSD, 160 million worth of XHV to xUSD conversions, which was incredible. So the growth was really cool to see. And that's when we started launching additional private assets, other stable coins based on, xEuro, XGBP for the pound, and silver, gold, and we had a synthetic Bitcoin as well, which we can get into. And so that year and a half of development led to the launch of xUSD, which led to this growth, which led to the launch of other assets. And then probably the second biggest thing to happen to Haven, other than the first two developers walking away, was the attacks that we had this summer. So around the end of June, there were a few different attacks that were launched against the protocol that were pretty sophisticated, that took advantage of some things that we missed in the protocol. And those forced us to shut down the conversions that we use on chain, to take a step back, fix the attack vectors that we had missed before, and sort of revamp how the protocol works, how secure it is, and the testing that we're going to put into it to make sure that it's secure in the future. So when we talk about Haven 2.0, that's what we're going to be launching next. And we're a couple months into developing essentially a new proof that would get rid of the attack vectors that were used this summer, make the protocol more secure. And that's what we're looking to launch in the next few weeks, hopefully, if everything goes well. We've made a ton of progress on that front. So when you think of Haven 2.0, it's the same chain, it's the same coin, same ticker, but it is sort of the new version of our code base that is going to hopefully make it more secure and battle tested for the long term.
Very good. And you guys are working with No Protocol, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah. So we've contracted with Cipher Stack, which is a full team that has some really obviously deep experience in Monero, probably the best minds on Monero's development and the math really behind Monero's validation structure, which is what we focus the most on, right? So we were fortunate enough to be able to just take the base layer of Monero and build Haven's mint and burn stablecoin protocol on top of it. But we also were able to take parts of the proof and the validation that Monero uses for its transactions and build a proof for our mint and burn conversions. And we did this first proof when we launched xUSD. And what we realized after the attacks that happened this summer was that we needed an additional proof that not only proved the value of the assets that were being converted to xUSD versus XHV versus XBTC or any of the other private assets that Haven has, but the type of transaction that was being converted. And the proof of value is what got us there, which we were able to have a ton of help in sort of putting that together. And now as we're developing this this new validation, we're working really well with Cipher Stack, and they've offered a ton of really helpful feedback on our both the logic for the proof and then the code that we're going to use to implement that logic. So we're really fortunate to have them working with us, and couldn't be happier to have a lot of great Monero minds taking a look at this issue.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that's really instilling a lot of confidence in the project, because sticklers about privacy, like some people that I follow on Twitter, like Seth for Privacy and Untraceable and some other folks in the Monero space, they're very excited about that development. And that bodes pretty positive things coming into the future. So you had mentioned ex-US dollar. First off, I'd be very interested to see what the flows for the last couple of days are into ex-US dollar because of all the volatility, everything going on with Evergrande. And I had mentioned this in my video yesterday too, where we looked at the chart on TradeOgre for the ex-US dollar. And, you had Monero down like 13%. You had Bitcoin down 10%. Ex-US dollar was pretty stable. And so that definitely proved itself and its worth in a very challenging test as far as liquidity is concerned, as far as market volatility is concerned. Looks like it was able to maintain its value, which is pretty good. So I want to talk about how that happens, what the logistics behind that are. How do you guys link Haven Protocol to the value of the US dollar?
Sure. Yeah, I think this would be good to go through. And just to clarify a couple things up front. So first is, after the protocol was attacked in June, one of the steps we took, which was an extreme step that we didn't want to take, but it necessitated protecting the protocol and making sure that it could survive to see another day. One of the steps is we disabled conversions, right? So before xUSD existed on the Haven chain, it was one token. It was XHV, which essentially looked a lot like Monero. When we built xUSD, we built a protocol on top of the Monero base layer that allows XHV to be burned for the US dollar equivalent in xUSD. And that's what created this algorithmic private stablecoin. I'll give you an example of how that works in a second. But after we were attacked, we shut down those conversions because the attack used a vector that manipulated the value of mint and burn transactions. So since the end of June, you haven't been able to burn XHV for xUSD, unfortunately. But you'll be able to when we launch Haven 2.0. And the idea is that the process that is used to convert and burn XHV into xUSD should be as secure and stable as possible. And the protocol itself will only ever allow you to burn $1 worth of XHV for one xUSD. That is the promise of the protocol that we are trying to improve on, that we're trying to strengthen for the long term, because I think the things that we went through this summer showed that we had some vulnerabilities that had to be fixed. So that's what we're focused on right now. But just to give you an example of how xUSD did work for about a year or so, and how it's going to work in the next couple of weeks when we launch Haven 2.0, I think it's helpful to just understand how an algorithmic stablecoin works. And maybe I can just walk you through an example of how a user would do it in their vault. So let's say you had $10,000 in USD, and you wanted to find a way to preserve that value in USD in a private way. That is the protocol that Haven has. That is the selling point that we think is unique to the project, right? So you take your $10,000, you go buy $10,000 worth of XHV at an exchange. Let's say the price of Haven is around $5, which is close to where it is today or the last week or so. That would give you 2,000 XHV. So your $10,000 would give you 2,000 XHV. You'd send that to your Haven vault, and you'd immediately convert that into 10,000 xUSD. So you now have a completely private stablecoin that represents the USD value that you had at the beginning of this process, and you bought that using an exchange, but you were able to convert it entirely in your wallet without any other third parties, and the conversion is done by the protocol. So let's say then you want to go sometime later in the next couple of weeks or months, you want to go back to USD for whatever reason. But obviously the price of XHV is volatile, like Monero is volatile, like Bitcoin's volatile. And let's say it's gone up to $10. So you would do a transaction in your Haven vault, and you would convert your 10,000 xUSD into what would then be 1,000 XHV, because the price of XHV doubled. You'd get half as much XHV back, and you could sell that XHV on an exchange for fiat again. So that's sort of the process. The idea is that you are able to manage and control your money in your vault on your own without anybody else, on a single protocol, on a single chain with multiple assets. That's the idea. So we can get into sort of how to, how price is determined, how we use oracles and all of that, because those are important parts of the protocol as well. But I think that gives you just an example of how people were using xUSD for the last year or so, and how they'll be using it against it.
Right, and that's a good walkthrough, because I know that when I was first digging into XHV Haven, and I was trying to learn the background of the project, I was like, okay, this sounds like a scam. Too complicated. I'm staying away from it. But you dig into it, it's actually a really genius concept. It's a really brilliant idea. But as
we call it the Haven
it's so
rabbit hole. Once you hear it for the first time, you're going to go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, for sure. And I brought out like the pen and paper. I'm like, let me do the math on this. This works. But it seems like a very ingenious idea. But as you talked about, very complicated in code, I'm sure, to put into practice. So
absolutely.
With that said, I want to talk about oracles for a sec, because I think that you guys use Chainlink, who I'm sure a lot of our viewers are familiar with, is an oracle for a lot of different DeFi projects. You guys use Chainlink in order to connect these xAssets to the dollar values outside of the protocol, I think, right?
That's correct.
So how does that work? Are you guys maybe thinking about using a private oracle in the future? Because I know some people have concerns about Chainlink.
Sure. So we have been using Chainlink since the launch of xUSD, and as far as standards in DeFi, they are the gold standard for oracles. I think that doesn't mean that there can't be better solutions, more innovations that are built on top of Chainlink. But until there are, Chainlink is one of the most secure oracle services that we have, and I think it's important to separate what Chainlink does for the protocol versus what the protocol provides to the user. And what Chainlink does is, you can go on Chainlink's feeds right now, and you can see they have an XHV price feed. And in addition to the dozens of other oracles that they have set up for lots of other projects in crypto and DeFi, there is a Haven protocol price feed. And that price feed draws every 2 minutes the average price of XHV across all the exchanges that Haven is listed on. And then what happens is, our protocol draws in that price that is reported by Chainlink's decentralized oracles, right? So they have, I think, a dozen or so pricing feeds that go into the average price that they report, and that price is pulled by our pricing or our protocol, and it creates what's called a pricing record. And the pricing record basically states for every block in Haven, this was the price in real time of XHV. And it may be off by a couple cents here or there based on, the few seconds of fluctuation of the price of XHV, but it is a real-time reporting of the price that's then used to calculate how much xUSD you're going to get when you burn XHV. So it doesn't impact anything about the private nature of Haven's transactions, the private nature of Haven addresses or balances, right? It is simply the mechanism that's used to create a price that is put into the header of each block so that the protocol knows how much xUSD to give you when you burn XHV. It is, we're really proud of sort of how that partnership with Chainlink has worked, because I think it has been a really successful example of how an Oracle should be used in DeFi. That being said, we know that there are going to be more innovations that are being built right now in the Oracle space. I think that they're going to focus on how you further decentralize the reporting of price. We've never seen Chainlink's Oracle for Haven be used in any way, manipulated in any way that would change the price that gets reported to our protocol. But that doesn't mean it couldn't happen. And it's something that is top of mind for us, given how important that interaction is between the protocol and the Oracle that it uses to determine price. So I think that's the best way to sum it up. There are a lot of cool Oracle projects out there that we're looking at, and I think in a perfect world we would have a completely decentralized, not managed by any one person Oracle that is entirely private in nature. But unfortunately, it just doesn't exist today. And it isn't. Our project is at its core, like a lot of other crypto projects, an experiment, and this is the best version of the experiment that we've been able to develop so far, and we're going to continue improving it and making it stronger over time.
Right. Well, I think that's very intellectually honest. You guys are just working with what you have. You are where you are. Hopefully that there are advancements in the future which allow you to branch off and make it more private and updated for sure. Given that it updates every 2 minutes, is there a potential for arbitrage in volatile circumstances?
Sure. Yeah.
Or is that something which is just, again, you're working with what you're working with? Hopefully that improves into the future.
Yep. Well, that is a good question, and it brings up a topic about the protocol that is also important for people to understand. So when you look at the different ways that somebody could try to game this protocol and game the mint and burn capabilities of XHV, you could come up with a lot of scenarios where people could try and manipulate the price on an exchange, manipulate how often they convert XHV into xUSD in their vaults, try and manipulate the Oracle itself, right? There's a bunch of different attack vectors there. And those are all things that we did really spend a ton of time thinking about at the beginning of this process, at the beginning of Haven 1.0, right? When we were building xUSD. And we came up with a couple different solutions that so far have mitigated all those attack vectors. And the first is that we don't actually use in the block header the real-time Chainlink price as reported. We use a 24-hour moving average of that price. And that does a couple things. One, it does smooth out the volatile nature of our price, given that Haven is still new and young and listed on relatively smaller exchanges, right? We're not on Binance. We're not on some of the larger tier 1 exchanges. So the price itself of Haven can move because the liquidity isn't there in the way that a top 50 crypto might be. So it smooths that out a little bit. And the other thing it does is it prevents people from using frequent mint and burn transactions to take advantage of small price movements on Haven to artificially inflate their xUSD holdings in order to sort of manipulate the mint and burn process. So we use that 24-hour moving average that's built into the protocol. And the other thing that we have in the protocol are lock and unlock times. Essentially, when you burn XHV for xUSD based on the existing price of XHV as calculated by a 24 moving average, you have to wait a certain amount of time before you can reconvert that xUSD back into XHV or into something else. So there are a few different lock options that you have, and they have different fees associated with them. But the short version is we feel like we've created a protocol that has a bunch of different checks and balances that the protocol deploys, right? This isn't something that the team or the project or some centralized entity goes in and changes every 5 minutes. This is something that's built into the protocol that every user will see in their vault when they go to exchange or convert XHV into xUSD, and is meant to defend against that type of manipulation that would either try and manipulate the price of XHV to game the system, or manipulate the price that's reported by the Oracle. So we could probably have a whole separate conversation about how we came up with all those different checks on the protocol, but those are the ones that are in place that are probably the most important right now.
That is fantastic. That is like really well said. Okay. And maybe next time when you're on, we could dig into the deets of that, but we're just trying to give a general overview. And I think that was really well said. But you had mentioned their fees. Now I was speaking with Arctic Mine, and one of his concerns about the Haven protocol, and I believe he actually worked as a developer on the Haven protocol. One of his concerns about it was that development fee that you guys have. He says that opens you guys up to, regulatory attack. Perhaps that makes you guys into more like a CFI project instead of a DeFi project. How would you address that concern?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's accurate at all. The legal answer, as we understand it, is we actually didn't start the project. We don't issue tokens. We never hold tokens for any other entity. We don't receive fiat. We don't sell the tokens as a project. So, I mean, we don't think that risk is real. I think certainly the regulatory risk in the stablecoin market is something that's very real that we pay attention to. But the use of a dev fee on our chain, I don't think that makes us that unusual. It's not something that we want to keep for the long term. It's not an optimal way to fund the project. And if you look at the first year and a half of the existence of the project, I think it paid our developers like a couple $100 a month, right? Like, it wasn't a sustainable way to keep some of the best minds in Monero building on our project. It doesn't make sense. And it's definitely our plan over time to phase it out, get rid of it entirely. I'm unclear when and how that'll happen, but that is our goal. We don't want to use it as a way to fund the project, but we don't think it poses that type of legal risk that you just described.
So do you have it now partially because it plays into your capacity to hedge against arbitrage like we were talking about before? It's a disincentivized or it's something to disincentivize people to switch from their xAssets into Haven consistently and frequently?
Are you talking about the development fee that's on the mining rewards, or the conversion fees that users pay? Because those are two separate things, right?
Okay, so I was talking about the conversion fee. So there's a fee too for the mining rewards.
Yeah, so there's a 5% fee on the mining rewards that goes into a dev wallet that has a public view key, and those are the funds that have been used to pay our developers since the beginning of the project. Right, there are separate fees that are used that a user has to pay when they convert XHV into xUSD, and generally, if you're using the default lock times, they tend towards zero, and they are not large fees. And there will be a percentage of those fees that gets paid back to miners as well, and then a percentage that gets paid back to the dev fund too. So I think the long-term view is that those conversion fees, if we do our job right and we launch and deploy a secure and successful protocol that people want to use, that people do use because they value their privacy and they want to have access to a network like Haven can offer. If we're doing our job, eventually over the long term, those conversion fees could be something that would sustain the development of the project. Again, this is all still an experiment that's in its infancy, so I wouldn't say that we've settled on a solution that's going to stay forever. But those conversion fees are also something that goes to the development wallet that helps fund, in addition to our developers that we pay, all the other activities, exchange listings and marketing and lawyers and all that stuff, which will probably never have enough resources just off of fees to cover all that stuff. But we try, and we've relied on a lot of generous community members who've given their own time free of charge and provided money to help us fund some of that stuff too, in addition to the development fund.
Fascinating. So a lot of it is voluntary. A lot of people
Most
are
of it is.
devoting their
Yeah,
time.
most of it is. Absolutely.
Okay. So that's one reason why you could probably phase out the development fee. And when you talk to your lawyers, what do they say about the development tax? What do they say about all that?
I mean, it's probably not something I can get into because I am not a lawyer and I don't want to pretend to be a lawyer and then give
Fair
an
enough. Fair
answer
enough.
that some other lawyer would get upset about. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's safe to say we feel comfortable with where we're at. And we're always thinking about those things because I think those are all fair questions to ask of a project. But it is something that is top of mind for us.
Very cool. The fact that you're working with lawyers, I mean, that's more legit than I initially anticipated. I thought this was totally underground. I thought this was like,
You
rushed
can't
into the
avoid
hoods and
lawyers.
stuff.
You can never avoid them.
Yeah, totally. So that's great to hear. That's really positive. So you had mentioned a little bit mining. You're talking about the fees on top of mining. And from what I researched, you guys use Kryptonite, I believe,
Right.
for mining.
Yep. We have a
Now, how
variant.
does that differ from RandomX in Monero?
So I will start this answer by saying I am absolutely the wrong person on our team to give you a detailed answer, but I can give you my explain it to a fifth grader understanding of how it works.
Perfect.
So we do use a variant of Kryptonite Haven, which is a proof of work algorithm. So Kryptonite Haven is ASIC resistant, and I believe the difference is it's GPU efficient versus RandomX, which is what Monero uses, which is CPU efficient. Hold on, my AirPods just died. Hold on one second. Can you still hear me at all?
Yeah, perfect.
Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Sorry, my AirPods just died, of course, right in the middle of my sentence.
All good, all good.
Okay, there we go. Where was I? Yeah, so our variant is a little bit different than RandomX, but they share a lot of similarities. I mean, they can be mined through pools, or you can use it to mine solo if you have enough hash rate. I think the biggest difference is the protocol itself. So, right, in Monero, you're mining XMR block rewards, and in Haven, you're mining XHV block rewards plus the xAsset conversion fees, which will end up being split between miners and the governance wallet. So you're also mining an additional reward, and the miners benefit from the usage of the protocol itself, right? Actually using minting xUSD and burning XHV and vice versa. Miners benefit from that as well. So,
and that's interesting because one of the main concerns for a lot of these projects is that as the halving continues, as you move towards that final limitation on the coins that can be mined, newly mined, that's going to disincentivize miners to continue to mine the project.
right.
And so the fact that this minting is going to presumably continue as long as civilization's running, right? I mean, therefore, miners are always going to be incentivized to continue to mine the project.
That's
that
really
right?
the goal. Yeah, absolutely. That's the goal. And I think one thing, we follow Monero's emission schedule. So we do have a tail emission after the original emission's done, a small tail emission, which will continue to incentivize mining. But yes, if we're doing our job and we've built an ecosystem of private stable assets that people actually want to use over the long term, it should be a really attractive project for miners as well.
That's amazing. That's really cool. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. What else do I got for you? So one more concern that I got from somebody who is into the Xano project. He says that you guys run off 3 Amazon servers. He is concerned about this as being a central point of failure. I'm not so familiar with how even that ties into crypto projects, but he brought this concern up to me. He wanted me to ask you. So what are your thoughts about that? Is this not correct? Is this FUD?
Yeah, it's a good question to ask. It is absolutely not correct. So we don't use AWS. I don't want to go too much into sort of the details of our OPSEC, but if to say it's something that's important for people to ask about. I mean, it is, we are a small project working on a big idea that is certainly going to take time to mature and to grow, as we've seen over the last couple of months of the fits and starts that we've had. And
our goal long term is to become completely decentralized, not run by a team, but run by the network that supports the users that support the Haven network. We're not there yet. We are a little bit centralized, and we're happy to admit that, because that's the only way that we've been able to sort of deploy different versions of the protocol and grow and innovate on top of what we already built. And long term, we want to be perfectly decentralized. Right now, we're not. So there are some things that remain in the team's control, and we're actively working on solutions to get them out of the team's control. But in terms of like, do we run on 3 AWS servers? That is not true. We have a lot more redundancies and protections built in than that. And we feel it is as secure as it can be right now. The things like the pricing record and our seed nodes and the Explorer and the website and our wallets and all that stuff. But that doesn't mean that we can't make it more secure and eventually work to decentralize it further, which we do want to do.
Very cool. You're making me just want to get on Trade Ogre right now and just completely bag up. That's great. That's great.
Trade Ogre, one of the, I think the first exchange that listed us at the very beginning. And you may not know it by like their UI, but they are one of the most reliable anonymous exchanges out there. So shout out to whoever the one person or 5 people are that run Trade Ogre. It's a great exchange.
That's amazing. I keep hearing people say, yeah, Trade Ogre, that one sketchy exchange, which just never seems to exit scam you, which is amazing.
Amazing. I've used it for 3 years now and have never had a problem. And the only problems I've had being like, hey, this transaction didn't confirm, got answers and help immediately. So better than I can say for most other like big centralized exchanges that don't have good customer service. So they're great.
Right. Better than Coinbase. I mean, if Trade Ogre wanted to link up my bank account so that I could put fiat on there, I'd be like, sure, go ahead. Better than Coinbase.
Then they'd have to hire lawyers probably.
Yeah, probably. So let's get to the fun stuff. There is some good things happening for Haven right now. Before all the crazy stuff happened in June, this is probably still the case, but you guys were working with Thorchain to build things up and to expand the operation. So could you give us some detail on that exciting development?
Sure. Yeah. So this was, the integration with Thorchain was probably priority number 1 before these attacks in June, and it's priority 1A. And the reason, I mean, after the launch of our 2.0 and this new validation that we're working on, and an overall more sort of secure attack-proof code base, which is our first priority right now. The next priority is this integration. And the reason is, I mean, we really think that in most of our community, most of our team feels this way, that the future of crypto is in decentralized exchanges. I think you're seeing a big shift in the way that centralized exchanges deal with their users, require from their users, ask of their users, and most of it is horribly invasive and doesn't protect people's privacy. In fact, it's the opposite, right? And in addition to that, I think all these steps that centralized exchanges have done to crack down and get people's information have also made them less likely to list and support and promote projects that care about privacy. There's a reason Monero's not listed on Coinbase. I think it's pretty obvious. And
right.
That is a troubling trend. I mean, to be honest, though, that's one of the reasons that we all got involved in Haven in the beginning. Was you could have sort of seen this trend coming a mile away, and we're starting to see it become a little more real these days. So the idea behind projects like Thorchain is that you can have a completely decentralized exchange experience that allow you to swap one layer 1 crypto for another layer 1 crypto. And right now that can only really be done in a centralized way. But Thorchain has proven that there is a model that can work as a decentralized exchange. And they have launched their first mainnet that allows you to swap native Ethereum from native Bitcoin, native BSC for native Bitcoin, and back and forth between these native chains without having to rely on a custodial exchange or some other third party. And they have an incredibly innovative setup. Probably I think our opinion is that they have the best decentralized exchange setup. There's lots of other cool projects out there, but theirs is the most ambitious. And really, the idea that Thorchain could enable someday somebody to exchange Bitcoin for XHV for Haven all in their own wallet without any other custodians being involved, and then take their Haven and convert it into xUSD or any of the other xAssets that we have. That's sort of the dream scenario for our project. We need liquidity for our projects. We need our users to be able to access XHV, to buy it if they want to convert into xUSD, and to sell it if they want to leave xUSD and go back into fiat. We want them to have all those options, or to go back into Bitcoin or any other crypto. And right now, the only way that they can do that is on centralized exchanges, and for the most part, smaller centralized exchanges. So building Haven integrations into projects like Thorchain is really sort of the top priority. Aside from having a secure protocol that works, that people trust, that's really sort of our next priority. And we're really excited about what Thorchain is bringing to the table.
No, that is super exciting, because like you said, if you want to get into private XUS dollars or xAssets like you're talking about, you probably have to go through some centralized exchange if you have Bitcoin or if you have other cryptos. And so Thorchain is going to be very essential to that. And I think Monero is working on something called Haveno. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Yes.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? That looks like a really promising project with atomic swaps and peer-to-peer decentralized exchange. If they can get that going, that's going to be key.
Yeah, absolutely. We like their name. Anything with Haven in the base of the name, we're for. No, it's great. I mean, it's a good example of Monero as a community always being interested in innovating and doing cool stuff that other people aren't doing. So we're fully supportive. And I think, the more decentralized exchanges, the better. We have a decentralized exchange called Polarity that we've worked with that is really cool. You should check out if you haven't already. That has xUSD capabilities. Another exchange started by one of our community members is called Havex, HAVX.io. That is not a decentralized exchange, but is a centralized version of a Haven exchange, which we think is something closer to what our users are looking for, that is non-KYC. So there's a bunch of different versions of decentralized exchange technologies, and the more the merrier. I mean, there needs to be more options so that people aren't funneled into centralized versions that control their information, control their money, and control the choices that they have. That's really what we're trying to avoid. And I think, we were excited that we had been working on the Thorchain integration for months, and we had gotten to the point where, we had working test swaps on a mocknet, sending Haven to another chain through Thorchain, and really close to finishing up some of the other dev pieces that need to be done. So it was really close before the attacks we had this summer that set us back in terms of timeline. But we're confident that once we launch Haven 2.0 and we have our protocol back online, working in a way that's secure, that users can trust, that Thorchain is going to be the next thing that we focus on finishing.
Very cool. Very cool. Very excited for that. Now, next question, and this is kind of out of left field, but this is something that I thought about before. I think I figured it out. It's kind of a koan, one of those Zen Buddhist koans, but like, if you've got xAssets, and I think you guys are working on X stocks and X gold and silver and things like that, right?
Yeah, we have X gold, X gold and X silver, XAU, XAG. We don't have anything that is like an X stock or some other, tracker that tracks an ETF or something like that. We don't have any of those things. But we have 10 assets: xUSD, gold, silver, euro, won, X Bitcoin, the British pound, Australian dollar, Swiss franc, and the yen.
Okay, very cool. So what some people may ask is they may say, okay, so you have all these xAssets, and at some point you're going to be able to trade these xAssets on something like Thorchain or Haveno. What use does Haven have if I can just trade these xAssets for different cryptos without having to go through Haven?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it's one that that a lot of people ask when they're first going down the Haven rabbit hole, because the rabbit hole is deep and there's a lot of things to think about. But the first one to remember is that the only way xUSD and any xAsset can be created is by burning XHV. It's the only way that those assets can be created. Now, they can be traded and transferred and sent and shared, all without having to deal with XHV. but the only way they're created is by burning XHV. And the only way to do that is to buy XHV, hold it, put it in your vault, and convert it to the asset of your choice. So there will always be a need for XHV on the chain to be used as a way to get into and out of xAssets. Now, that ensures that we have a base token that A, has value, and B, is something that people need and want to use. But over the long term, like you said, the goal is really to allow people to move in and out of these assets as easily as possible. So if that's through a Thorchain wallet like ThorSwap, great. We want somebody to be able to trade their Bitcoin for xUSD in one transaction with nobody else involved and be done with it. That's exactly what we're looking for. And there's other decentralized exchanges that are going to allow you to do that. We want all of those options to exist for our users. And I think the more options that exist, the more people that are going to be interested in converting their holdings into a private asset, a private stablecoin, and trusting that those assets maintain their value and are secure. But that doesn't change the fact that the base of the protocol XHV is always going to be needed to create those assets and to grow the network in the future, if that makes sense.
Right. So it's sort of backed by Haven.
Yeah. So the easiest way to think about it is xUSD is backed by the value of Haven, whether Haven is trading at $5 or $500. It almost doesn't matter what the price of XHV is, because you are going to be able to convert based on the dollar value of XHV. So $1 worth of XHV, regardless of what the price it's trading at, is always going to be worth 1 xUSD in the protocol. And that is how the protocol was created, how the proofs that it uses are constructed, and how it will always work in the future, right? That part won't change.
Right. And the next question someone would have is, what if the dollar collapses? What happens then? Well, I imagine it would then be tied to another asset like Bitcoin. It depends on, what has the most liquidity, right? I mean, you cash it out maybe for Bitcoin or another asset that people are willing to trade for it, I would presume.
Yeah. I mean, we hope that we have set up a protocol in Haven that lives long enough to see the dollar not be the default currency for the world, right?
Right.
And if it doesn't, we will have an asset on our network, a private stable asset on our network that reflects, the dominant currency. And we do have XBTC, which is our synthetic private version of Bitcoin on Haven. And we have these other fiat currencies that I mentioned in addition to gold and silver. But after we get through this launch of Haven 2.0 and have some more time to start planning and developing what the future of the protocol is going to look like, we're going to lean on our community to sort of help guide what those additional future assets should be. And there's been tons of ideas. I would encourage anybody listening to this to come into our Discord. Our team and our community is on there every day talking about these ideas. And it's really why we're all involved in the project, because we think it's something just really interesting to think about and plan for. And that is one of the questions too that we're always going to be thinking about in the future is, what assets should we have on the network, and what assets should we get rid of? What don't make sense? What do make sense? And that's what we sort of rely on our community to help us with.
Right. And one of the great possibilities of all this, and first off, I just want to say that you can definitely judge a project to some degree by the quality of the Discord and the quality of the community. And that's something that I've learned just sort of branching out to some of these other coins in the space, what we like to call the Freedom Coin space. You've got Monero, you've got Pirate Chain, you've got some of these others, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing on our channel is we want all of these coins, all these projects to work synergistically for what I hope is our ultimate goal, which is freedom, which is financial liberty from this crazy economic system that they're setting up, right? But I do want to say, I was going to say something. Yes, one of the great opportunities that I think is out there for this is that this could turn into a way that you could be a trader and trade stocks. Maybe you guys get linked up with bonds. Who knows how far this could go? And you could be totally private, because if you were to be a trader on Robinhood or something like that, well, they're tracking everything you do. You're going to get a 1099 and all this other stuff. Now, again, no disclaimer. I'm not saying you should do anything illegal, blah, blah, blah. But that opens up that possibility for some people, right? I mean, if you guys really expand this to the point where you could link up oracles with, various different stocks, various different commodities and things like this, Is that a possibility that you guys could become like a totally private exchange for whatever, stock, good, or value that you want to trade?
It's absolutely a possibility. And I think the reason that we all got involved in Haven and remain involved today and want to see it through to something that's successful long term is because we think anything is possible on with this type of project, right? We could essentially create any asset to track the price, any Haven asset to track the price of any external asset that our users wanted. I think long term we'll have to think about whether or not stocks, equities make sense there, but it goes back to the principle of why somebody would want to use Haven. And that principle is really about who controls your money. And right now, for a lot of people, I would imagine the answer is a bank controls your money, an exchange controls your money, some other centralized entity that's not you controls your money. And we think it should be you. And whether you want to hold your money in dollars or in gold or in Bitcoin or in yen, we want to give people the tools to be able to control their money the way they want to in a way that's completely private. So that's what guides the project as sort of our long-term thinking about how to manage the project. But it also opens up the possibility of all sorts of different things that we could do with Haven's xAssets in the future. And I think we're open to all those ideas, subject to what our community wants, what our community cares about, and then at the end of the day, what our lawyers tell us. But the possibilities really are endless with the protocol and the model that we feel like we've built.
Very well said. That is a beautiful vision. Beautiful vision. Speaking of stablecoins, we've heard a little bit about Oxen. You've probably heard about this project. They're trying to do a private stablecoin as well. It's a kind of cool thing over there. They've got private messaging as well. What do you think about that project? What do you think about their developments with that? Because some people see you guys as competitors.
Yeah. So again, I will say up front, I am honestly not an expert on Oxen, but I've liked everything that I've seen and read about the project. So, right, it's not built on Monero. It's proof of stake, as I understand it. So it does not sort of inherit the Monero privacy protections. So I don't know what that means for its. Is it private by default? I'm sure somebody smarter than I am can give me the answer to that question. Those are the things I'd want to find out. Session is obviously their messaging product, which I have used just a couple times, but it looks really cool. And obviously everybody could benefit from more options in that space. And I think on the stable coin, they have a model that is asset backed and not algorithmic, right? But I don't know enough about it to judge it by the merits, other than to say, I'm really happy that other people are interested in developing private stablecoin options. The more the merrier. We need more options in this space. People need to be able to have other ways to protect their privacy, whether it's via a stablecoin and managing their wealth and their assets, or whether it's messaging or something else. So I'm rooting for that project, and hopefully I'll go learn more about it so I'm more informed. But I think the space needs more privacy innovation and not less. So more power to them.
That is the exact attitude we have here on this channel. Seriously, we root for every single project. Now, we're Monero first. We love Monero, but when it comes to smart contract projects like Darrow that want to do private smart contracts, or you guys that want to do xAssets, like all this stuff is great. And the more that these projects succeed, the more that I think there's going to be a synergy and a growth of the entire space, which is good for humanity, which is good for everybody. In my opinion.
I agree, and I think. There's maximalists in every community, ours included, Monero's included. And I do think with the amount of time I've spent in all of these communities, I think the maximalists are in the minority. And I think most people that get involved in these projects do it because they care about something. And for the most part, they care about, protecting their information, having control over their money. And we all share that in common. And if there are new ideas and new innovations that can help all of us do that, I think, for the most part, everybody in the Monero and the Haven community wants to see those things succeed. And I mean, I certainly do, and our team does, because I think it only makes this space more attractive to people that, are looking for those options and don't know how to get into it, don't know what their options are, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think Eric Voorhees is even getting excited about what you and Thorchain are doing. So you're even bringing in some of the Bitcoin maxis, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
That's the success of the whole community coming together. So last question, my friend. Thank you so much for the time. I mean, we've really learned a lot. I've learned a lot, and it's really been a pleasure having you on. But what developments are you excited for the Haven protocol? What are you guys working on right now? What do you see in other communities that could tie into what you guys are doing that could really move you guys to the next level?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the thing that we're spending 100% of our time on right now is the launch of Haven 2.0 and really what we're trying to do after what was a really difficult summer of some sophisticated attacks launched against some attack vectors that we hadn't accounted for, right? That was a really tough thing to go through. But as we look around the crypto space, I think, any crypto project that hasn't been attacked by some bad actor is probably not trying to solve a problem that's worth solving. And I not that we want to be attacked, but I think it's a good example of the reason that we're all involved in this project, and that's to make Haven as secure as possible so that more people can use it. So what we're working out right now is our developers have written a second validation on top of the proof of value that's in our original white paper, which you can go read, havenprotocol.org. It's our website. The second validation is going to prove through a formula and an algorithm the asset type that is being converted on chain, in addition to the value of the asset that's being exchanged, which is the first proof that we had. And we learned a lot of lessons over the last couple of months about how to think like an adversary and how to develop solutions that patch those attack vectors. And we have a really incredible team over at Cipher Stack that is giving us feedback on this process and is helping us think through that logic that, hopefully after the deployment of this new code base and this new validation, the protocol is even more secure and ready to take on these challenges. So launch of Haven 2.0, we've made a ton of progress, and we hope to have some more news to report in the coming days, if not weeks, for that launch. And after we launch Haven 2.0, getting the protocol back up and running, spreading the word about Haven, and then really the integration with Thorchain and expanding the liquidity of XHV into other decentralized exchanges is really what we're focused on after security, after testing, after the launch of 2.0. I think Thorchain is probably the next thing that we're really, really excited about. If you haven't checked out Thorchain, really go do a deep dive on it. It's worth it. Do a deep dive on Haven first, but then go check out Thorchain. They're doing incredible stuff. So those are the two big things right now.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, where can people go to become part of the community? You had mentioned the Discord earlier. You had mentioned the Haven website. Where would you suggest people go?
Start at the website, havenprotocol.org. That's where you can set up a Haven vault, which is our version of a wallet. If you buy Haven XHV, you can send it to your vault and manage it there. And that's where in your vault is where you convert XHV into all these other assets if you want. The website has a link to the Discord. We have somewhere over 8,000, I think, active Discord members in a very active community. So if you have questions, if you need troubleshooting, we've got a whole group of folks that, for the most part, are volunteers that will answer any question you have about how the protocol works or any problems you might have. So go to Discord. That's the best place to find us. We have a Telegram as well. The team is probably a little less active in Telegram, but we have a lot of great community members that are working on Telegram. And of course, Twitter. Our Twitter handle is HavenXHV, where we try and be part of the conversation about how to promote privacy and educate people on their options in protecting their information, controlling their money, taking back control of their money. We try to stay active on Twitter as well. So those are all good places to start.
Well, very cool, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on to the channel and giving us the DL on everything going on with Haven. And I hope that you'll come back to give us updates when Haven 2.0 is complete and we could see what's going on from there.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having us on. We'd love to come back. We are a project that plans to be around for a while. And anytime we have something new to share, we'd love to come talk about it, answer questions, do a deep dive, because you guys are great. And the Monero community is great. And we think that it's great to be able to support each other too. So thanks a lot.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll speak again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right.